Hi, welcome to a shitty amateurish tutorial of early game ZvZs designed to help shitty players like yourselves and anyone else who you consider shitty to improve in what seems to be the general consensus that lower tier Zergs hate the most. The matchup, I mean. My English got fucked up there, but we'll have to manage. So, I'm playing a game, I'm obsing a game with only myself in it. And it really shows just the openers and just sort of how to get through all the early stages of ZvZ. So you don't die to stuff like Ling All-Ins, which I'm sure a lot of people do. So I just want to get into it, and I don't really want to speed up the replay because I do have a lot of things to talk about. I obviously, everything looks standard for now because there's nothing you could really do that isn't standard, except go for an early pool. But in this game, or what I consider to be the best opening, which is totally subjective, is I like to go pool first. I like to go 15 pool, but if you don't feel too confident in your early micro, if they 6 pool or something, then you can go a 14 pool or a 13 pool. It all depends on you. And a pool first, and I'm gonna pause it right now. I choose pool first because I think it is to be the most economic option, and also the safest. So there are three sort of distinct openings in ZvZ that you can do. You can do the early pool, all the way up to from 6 pool all the way up to like 10 gas or 10 pool speedlings, or or just 10 pool without a gas into a hatch. But that most certainly, if microed well, will always kill off a 15 hatching player. So although 15 hatch or a hatch first player is the most economically ahead, they're actually not the safest. In fact, they'll just die straight out to something crazy. So I like to get a pool first. There's also an opening where you do a 14 gas 14 pool, and you line up your queen and your metabolic boost, your speedlings. I don't particularly like that because you are in the end mining gas, and that's not minerals, which you could be putting towards a quicker hatchery or a quicker second queen, or quicker drones, quicker everything. And if your opponent defends against your early 14-14 speedlings, then you're pretty much boned, or fucked, as I like to say, as the formal term. And think about it this way: if you're against a 6 pool, which would which would let you get your lings out first? A 14 gas and then a 14 pool, or just a 14 pool first. So obviously the pool first would defend against 6 pools a lot better. So I go 15 pool. I don't think it's too relevant now where you put your spawning pool placement, but in earlier days, you see that I rally my 15th drone that I made into a hatch, and it will align pretty much perfectly for the hatch timing. It might wait a bit, but in my opinion, that's the best way to go about pool first and then hatching. I was saying something. Oh yes, the Sim City in which you put your pool in does not really your pool placement does not really affect these sort of newer age maps, but old maps like Lost Temple or Shattered Temple or whatever, you would try to like put a pool here, so then like Banes would go in harder because a lot of Ling Bane All-Ins were a lot more common there, but rarely do you see it in today's games. So I get a 16 gas. So I did a 15 pool to just review. 15 pool into a 15 hatch. The 15 drone was used to build the 15 hatch. And then I got a 16 gas. Now the reason I do this is because this puts me at a 15 out of 18 supply. What I'll do next is I'll wait, save larva, get a queen, get it to 17 out of 18. And then once I have 17 out of 18, I'll get an overlord. And I'll use the first larva for a scouting zergling. Scouting is the most important thing in early game ZvZ. It's also the reason why most people die. You might never see your Zerg opponents scouting, but they might just die to all-ins, which goes without saying. But when your first Overlord reaches their natural, where you should be sending it to their natural anyways, you will see that their hatch timing. You see I've selected this Overlord. If there was a hatch here, I would select it, and then quickly go back to my own hatch and compare the timings of it. So since I did a 15 pool into a 15 hatch, if they did the same build, then the hatch timing would be the same. If they did a 14-14, their hatch would be around like 300 HP less than my hatchery, so it's 300 HP slower. And if they did a weird like 14 pool and then gas, not 14 gas, 14 pool, but 14 pool and then 14 gas and then hatch, their hatchery is around 150 HP slower than mine, so it'd be around 550 HP. So less than mine, because I got my gas after I put down the hatchery. And if they did a 15 hatch, their hatchery would be around a solid 300 to 400 HP ahead of yours. And if they do 15 hatch or hatch first, they are slightly ahead economically, not by a lot, maybe by like 1 drone or 2 drones at maximum. That's about it. But if they do a 15 hatch, the great thing that you can do with your pool first build is that you can send your Overlord into their main. And you see that my queen has only just begun, 13 seconds out of 50 seconds. So if my Overlord goes into their main, and my queen's not even out yet, then their queen is so far away. And you can usually see that when you usually go in and scout a 15 hatch, you'll see that right when you go in, their pool finishes, and you can check their gas timing. And you can compare it again to yours. That is a very important point in early game ZvZ that most people just sort of overlook, is comparing gas timings. And if you were to, and also the second point that goes without saying is that as soon as you create your gas and it finishes, you have to start mining it immediately, or you will be missing out on mining time that obviously from the gas. But say you made your gas early and then you didn't mine it until like 20 seconds later, like why did you get your gas at that time? You know, you could have got it 20 seconds earlier. Not to be too critical, but ling speed is very important. It's also the main thing to scout your opponent. So I would really just try to look at the notifications here. If it says extractor finish, you know, just put 3 drones on there immediately. So if they 15 hatch, you can scout, and if not, you usually just send your Overlord to the third. Reason why I sent it to the third is because, and not like one Overlord here and one Overlord here to see like, you know, lings coming out, is that everything that this Overlord, if I were to send it here, an Overlord here, and Overlord here, everything that this Overlord sees is already seen by this Overlord. So that is like the most important of early to mid game ZvZ is, as I said earlier, scouting, but scouting with this Overlord. And you don't necessarily have to move this Overlord. All you do is just watching this. You don't actually have to watch this Overlord on the screen right here, but you know, you're macroing, you're injecting, you're doing whatever, and you always keep your eye on here. As soon as you see lings come out, you make that amount of lings -2. Why -2? Because you do want to get an economic advantage against your opponent, and you don't want to be behind them by making more lings. If you make the same amount of lings, well, you have the defender's advantage. You have queens to defend your hatcheries, so technically you would still win the still win the fight without the 2 extra lings. But if you are just really bad with micro, or you know, something that you got to improve on, then go ahead, make the same amount of zerglings. You will still be ahead slightly because you have been droning quicker by like a little bit, but at the end of the day, you should just try to stop, you know, bad habits, but only when you're comfortable. And obviously going behind is much better than just losing outright. So you see that this is the first queen that comes out, and you inject it in your main hatchery, and well, I did, and I rally it immediately to my natural. If there's an enemy Overlord, I would not try to chase it generally unless I know it's going to die, or that my queen is really far away from an inject. Then I might go send out to kill it, but I wouldn't try to wander it off too much. You know, against a good opponent, they'll never lose an overlord. And missing an inject is really bad, especially if you get their overlord down to like 1 HP and you can't really kill it. So as soon as you get the gas, mine the gas 100, immediately start ling speed. Again, scouting is everything. As soon as these two lings pop, I really should have just sent one into to scout. See if they're droning, see the timing of their baneling nest. The most they'll have is just one queen anyways, like I do right here. So they can't kill your Zergling fast enough. So you'll see if, you know, he did some crazy stuff like he just started making a lot of speedlings, or, you know, if he made a spine like really early, like right now, which is totally unnecessary. And then you can sort of, you know, scout and see that. And more importantly, you want to scout right now as soon as you have your first pair of Zerglings, because if they go something like 14-14, which you cannot scout with your initial overlord, because their queen will be out to kill your overlord if you try to send it into scout, and you see that their hatch timing is slower than yours, as I've mentioned earlier, then it is pretty much you can never scout against a good opponent, because their speed will be much, much quicker than yours, and their speedlings will always deny your slow Zergling scout. It's the most frustrating thing, I know. I've been through that, where you always just send scouts. You're like, I'm trying to scout, but you lose the Zergling to their Zergling, and even though you put in the effort to scout, you didn't really put in the thinking power to scout by sending it right now, because if they did 14-14 and they rushed their speed, then the speed won't be finished for them, and you will go in. If they 10 pool and speedling gas kind of thing, then you see that early speed, then you know, okay, I gotta make a lot of lings right now because he did a 10 pool and I'm heading drones, stuff like that. So this sort of goes on. So I just want to go into the early build right now. Is the next building that I like to place is after I get 100 gas for the spawning pool, I like to mine 50 gas very, very quickly from this one extractor, and as soon as I have 50 gas, I will pull one drone off, and I will take one drone and build the baneling nest. Very, very important in my natural, because you might say like, oh, I don't want him to, if he doesn't scout, or if he has a hard time scouting, he doesn't scout my main, then I've effectively hidden the baneling nest from him. However, that may be the case, and that may go okay for some games. The baneling nest is really needed at your natural because it helps SimCity the base a lot. Now you see I put a baneling nest here. I couldn't exactly put it right here because the creep hasn't expanded there. So you have to preemptively decide a position for you to put a baneling nest. You'll see I put it right here. So that's where it blocks lings and banelings if my opponent were to all-in me. And you'll see that I strategically left this gap, the same 4x4 building placement hexes, for an Evo chamber. So if I do see a heavy ling bane aggression, which happens very, very often in lower league games, then I can easily throw an Evo chamber here, have my spine here, and any aggression that tries to bust me can only go through this avenue. Even though it is into my drone line, it is only one choke point of attacking, as opposed to if I put my bane nest here and only have a spine here, then they can easily go through that and bust it without even using banelings. They could just hit it with lings and then use their banelings to, you know, catch any lings that you try to defend with. So it's very important that, although it might be, you know, cool or cute to deny scouting from your opponent of your baneling nest, a SimCity is much, much important, and I encourage you all to do it regardless of what race rank you are. Anyone should just do it because it is so it is one of the deciding factors of early game ZvZ if there's any aggression going on. And the reason I pull one from gas here is because you see that I'm accumulating a bunch of gas, but I don't have much of a use for it. It's not like I'm going to have an early layer, because I cannot afford an early layer. When I have 2 hatcheries with injects going, you'll see that most players, even pro players, will just leave 3 on gas and get an early layer and sort of like spread a creep tumor to grab an early third. But I like to get more and more drones out. I think that's a more standard thing to do, and I don't really want to commit myself to early layer tech, because if you get an early layer, then there has to be a use for that early layer, and if there is no use, then it's sort of a waste. So obviously playing against nobody except myself on this map, the most important thing, as I said again and again, is scouting. And all the while doing all your macro stuff, your eye is always looking at this overlord. Okay? Always this overlord. You don't want to send it close right here because their queen might pick it off. And if you send it right here, then their queen will pick it off if they send an overlord for high ground vision. And you want to keep an overlord here to see if their third timing, if they get a really late or a really early one. Usually it's later, obviously. This is still early to mid-game. And if they sneak lings around right here just to be sneaky, then you can see everything with this overlord as well. This works most on most maps, or on most maps your first overlord should see everything. But on maps like Daybreak, then you can I also like to put my overlord on the ramp outside their natural, the big one with the rocks, just like this one. So you'll see that my worker count's doing okay. All I made was 2 Zerglings, so I'm just making mass drones, and I'm still getting my Ling speed. And since I sent my first slow Ling scout, depending on what timing I see their speed for their Zerglings to deny my scouting or whatever, then I'll scout based on that. But usually you should always get the first slow Ling as soon as you make these 2 Zerglings, as from before. You send the first one to scout whatever they're doing, like maybe a Roach Warren or maybe like 7 Roach Rush, you know. And as soon as this Zergling speed finishes, that's when you send your second scout. If you see that they have a relatively same gas timing than you, or a later gas timing due to your initial scout, or if they 15 hatch and you overlord saw them, then obviously you can scout much earlier with your second Zergling. And you'll try to do that because scouting is everything. I would always pay 25 minerals to see if my opponent is making what units, and you'll always see that because their natural expansion is half of their production because they have 2 queens up. So you'll see half of the units that they're producing. So with all that in mind, we're just going to go on to our next big point, is that since most early ZvZ games are Lingbane all-ins or aggressions or cheeses or roach timings or whatever, then you'll see that when your Baneling Nest is halfway, if you are a player who is sort of bad with micro, or you couldn't scout your opponent if they might Lingbane all-in you, then when your Baneling Nest is halfway, I would suggest making 2 sets of Zerglings, so 4 Zerglings in total, just so those Lings, when you see that the flood of Zerglings coming under your first Overlord or your second Overlord, if they're trying to be sneaky, you can just morph those Lings into Banes, and you will have enough gas even with just 2 on gas. And obviously that's going to be enough defense, because if you don't make preemptive Zerglings to time along with your Baneling Nest, because technically Zerglings take what, I don't know. I think it's like 27 seconds. Oh, 24 seconds. So technically, you can make them at 36 out of 60. So if you make them around that, I just say halfway because I don't want you to try to calculate too much. Just halfway, then you can line up your Zerglings to morph into emergency Banes. If you wait till your Baneling Nest is finished and they come at you with a bunch of Lings, because their speed timing is quicker or it's the same, then your Lings will pop out when they get to your base, and they might have been saving larva for more Lings, and you won't have cost efficient trades. So it'll just be Lings against Lings. You might have a queen, you might get it surrounded, you know, they might just be cheesing you from the start and have more Zerglings. So I really recommend getting 4 Zerglings halfway when your Baneling Nest is halfway finished. I don't do it this game because I'm not facing against anyone, but I'm just telling you this happens. And sort of, you see, I have a bunch of larvae, and I still have 75 gas. That would give me enough for 3 Banes, and I still can't spend all my larvae and money. You see that I just spent all my money. I'm making all the drones. I need a spine crawler because a spine crawler not only defends against Ling Bane rushes, they also are just a good unit to defend against anything that comes. Even a Ling Scout. A Ling Scout that runs into your base, guess what's going to hit it? It has to be your spine because your queen might be, too slow or out of position. Your lings are too slow or out of position. Then your spine will always hit it. Your spine always does well against banelings. It's always good to have a spine crawler. Just don't get it too early. I got it at relatively standard time if I scouted my opponent was macroing. If they weren't macroing, then this is a terrible timing. I need it much, much earlier. And the whole point of this early game rambling that I'm talking about here, even though I only have like 5 minutes played on this game and I've been talking forever, is that as soon as you see the Zerglings, it's panic mode. It's time to make units. It's time to morph the Banes that you preemptively had the Zerglings pre-made for. And most importantly, you need to pull your queen. Even if it's close to inject, even if it's whatever, hotkey your main hatchery, start making another queen, and just block off your ramp, build an Evo chamber. I'll slowly do that. And just try to micro everything here. Again, the SimCity is everything. If you see an earlier, early aggression, then obviously you're gonna put the Evo chamber wall much quicker. I'm just assuming that this is a regular macro game and you don't have to do that. So I also like to put, say this is all going macro, and since I've covered all the bases for early game aggression, say you see roaches, then you have to drop your own roach warren and start making drones and spines. Don't try to make too many lings because slow roaches, their move speed without speed is actually the same as Hydra's off creep. So roaches off creep and Hydra's off creep move the same speed with when roaches don't have speed, 2.25 move speed. It's really slow. So going across map to attack, your spines can finish, and then when your roach warren finishes, you can make some roaches. You can also make some lings for Bane morph, but just don't spend too much larva on lings against roach attacks because roaches, at the end of the day, they do have 1 armor. You're not going to have any upgrades on your lings finished. You shouldn't have any upgrades on your lings finished. And they'll just sort of lose. So if you ever see like an early roach ling attack, just wait for like 2 spines. You don't even 3 spines because you're only using 1 larva per spine, whereas you're using a bunch of larvae for speedlings that aren't cost effective against roaches and whatever combination they might send at you. So once you feel safe and you scouted your opponent, and besides, once you have speed, you should always scout your opponent. Try to scout them whenever possible. Like I would say ideally every 45 seconds to every minute if you don't see them do anything. Obviously, if you see them attack you, then you don't have to scout because you know that they're attacking you. I like to get my roach warren and the Evo chamber relatively the same time. Well, actually, I don't. I'm suggesting that you do it because you want your roach warren and your Evo chamber as like and your starting of the layer to be synchronized as a sort of, okay, there's no Ling Bane aggression I have to defend. It's time to macro. It's time to transition myself out of this early Ling Bane aggression. So when you think it's time to do that by scouting and or defending against their aggression or whatever happens, you try to get a roach warren, an Evo chamber, an extra geyser, and a layer. The reason for all of this is because roaches need gas, and you see that I saturated one back on gas. If you only have 2 on gas, you got to remember to put the 3rd one back on. And so roaches need gas, evolution chamber upgrades need gas, and layer needs gas. Well, just the layer initial principal cost. So I like to get 2 gases. If you think 3 gases, it's you'll see that I can afford sort of everything that I'm doing. I don't like getting an early 3 gas because Every time you get a gas, you're not only using one drone to build the extractor, and that's not only costing you 75 minerals. You're using 3 drones, 3 larvae to mine gas that you're missing out on minerals for. So you're gonna feel compelled to do something with gas. If you have too much gas, you're not gonna be able to do anything. And again, if you want to play a macro game, you're gonna try to get a 3rd hatchery, right? So you'll see that I sort of afford everything on 2 gas. And obviously I haven't been scouting because I'm not playing against anyone, but always try to have around 4 to 6 lings outside your natural at any given point of early to mid to even mid to late game, because you just want to, if there's ling counterattacks, if there's mutas or whatever, then you want to morph your lings into banes immediately, and you want to have lings to scout. If you make 2 and you go like, oh, I just want to send 1 to scout, and then he comes at you, then you can only morph 1 ling into bane. It's a bad idea, okay? So 4 to 6 lings at all times. And as soon as your layer finishes, here is one of the biggest mistakes that pro gamers don't do, is that as soon as your layer finishes, you need to morph your overlord into an overseer. With this sort of trending of metagame, say you've been scouting all the time and you see that their gases are taken, or that this gas isn't taken, or that this gas is taken, and or this gas is taken, and that you can't see this gas if this gas is taken. You gotta morph the overlord into an overseer, and you gotta send it in their base and drop the changeling. You need as much scouting as possible, because with this sort of like Idra metagame, or like Korean ZvZ metagame, people like to go fast and fester. This is just like the top games, and when they go fast and fester, they need like all the gas they can get, and all the units that they're making are either just, you know, a 3rd hatchery and a bunch of lings. But on any ladder, you know, your regular type of average Joe kind of game, you're not, when you see a bunch of lings coming at you, it's like watching a Protoss who's on 2 base and 4 gases send and have 8 gateways, just keep sending zealots at you over and over again until you can defend it off, or all the zealots die. Then what happens? You might be preoccupied by all this pressure. You're not, you know, you might not be thinking straight. But at the end of the day, he has 4 gases. What are those 4 gases going into? It's probably DTs, because he has 8 gates, or, you know, something like that. So when you see a bunch of lings, like a bunch of zealots, all mineral units, and you see that they have a bunch of gas, you really need to know where the gas is going to. I automatically see that a bunch of lings and a hatch, and they have a bunch of gas, then I'm gonna just assume that they're gonna go mutas, because mutas would be the safe way, or the cheesy and the safest way to go, the most greediest way. Well, not the safest way, but you know, in that situation, the most safe way. The most greediest way would be fast infestors, because the infestors come out much later than the mutas, and the lings and will not defend against the roach counterattack, stuff like that. You don't really need to worry about that. I'm just saying that you need your overseer as soon as possible to scout. And even if their build is delayed, then you can scout their lair timing, or their spire timing if they make 1, their evo chambers timing if they have 2 evo chambers or 1 evo chamber, which is a really big deal, because if you have 2 evo chambers, you're going to need a 3rd gas. You see, I'm only using 2 gases, and my resources are like low. They're low because I'm getting a 3rd hatch. Imagine if I got a 3rd gas, my 3rd hatch would be much later, and my defensive units would be also much later. So you're sort of evolving as this game goes along, assuming that you've defended against their initial push and stuff, if they have one. You'll see that my overlord placement is in this sort of position, and good thing about the early overseer is that you can see if they're going mutas, and then you can try to pull your overlords back into a spot where they can't get sniped, that sort of thing. Obviously, if you're going to morph this into an overseer, which I usually do, I usually send a speed link to see their 3rd timing anyways, if they haven't taken it, obviously, because you always need to have scouting. So at this point, you're into the good part of ZvZ, the part that everyone loves, the part that everyone hates for lower league players, because they usually don't know how to go through the early game, because really no one really teaches you much in commentaries and stuff, is that you need to survive. You always need to scout. So the biggest point of surviving early game ZvZ, and pretty much any game at all, is scouting. But in ZvZ it's the most important, because Zerg makes the fastest units, and they make their units the fastest. Like their building time is fastest, and the units are fastest as well compared to the other races. So your scouting needs to be extra, compared to the other races, ZVP or ZVT. So I'm just gonna finish the game here, and when you have your layer, it's time to go for a tech. I obviously went roach speed first, and I still am only on 2 gas, and I can't afford this. But if you do decide to go for, say, I would say go maybe a second evo chamber maybe, or try not to get too quick infestors, because if your opponent just mega drones low gas and goes mass roach and hits you, then you might have like 4 infestors and like 4 roaches, and that's all you have enough money for, and you're never going to survive that if they split. So don't try to tech infestors too quickly. Try to always get your drones more, because even if you're saturating all 4 of your gases, even though you're saturating everything you can, you're still banking up the gas. The gas isn't going to go anywhere. The infestors are just going to be later, but at least you'll survive. Always remember, being behind and surviving is always better than just losing the game because you got supply blocked or you make too many drones. Obviously, supply block is one of the big things. It's also a good thing that you make the initial 4 Zerglings to time up with your Baneling Nest, because if you get supply blocked, then at least you'll have 4 Banelings anyways, because those don't cost supply when you already have Lings out. So that's pretty much early to mid-game. From this point, people, pro level players and any player in any sort of caliber have sort of deviated their build already. Maybe they went fast infestor, maybe they went fast roach, maybe they went Nidus network, some crazy stuff, or maybe when they went Spire. So I'm not telling you how to play the entire game, I'm just telling you how to survive. And you don't even have to play. Remember, I played this specific way because I was against nobody. If I was against someone who had early aggression, then I would also plan out what I would do in advance in response to my opponent. And I think that's it. I don't know how long this video recording thing has been, but I hope you learned a lot, and have fun not losing your ZvZs after a couple tries. Thanks for watching, bros.